This segment of Sportz Blitz is brought to you by Alex City Marine, the Lake Martin area's premier new and used boat and motor dealership. Find out more at alexcitymarine.com.
Welcome back into Sportz Blitz Live. Look, if you've ever heard a Florida Gators game on the radio, I know you've heard this gentleman scream out, "Oh my," at least once or twice. And that's Mick Hubert, the play-by-play voice of the Florida Gators. Mick, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, and looking forward to next weekend. It's been a long time coming, but hopefully it'll be a good season.
You know, I did not know this, but you just told me that you're entering your 29th year. We just had Eli Gold on. He's entering his 29th year as play-by-play voice of the Crimson Tide, and I guess it's just fate that you two guys have been in the booth the same amount of time, and Florida and Alabama have probably been the two preeminent programs in the SEC since you guys have been calling games.
Well, that's right. I've known Eli a long time. He's a wonderful man. I love him to death. He does a great job, and like I said, we go way back. And back when I first got here in the early 90s, Eli was also doing Alabama basketball, so I saw him a little bit more then because he was I could see him in the wintertime, but he's an outstanding announcer. And yeah, we've gone head to head, and it's been a lot of battles. We've won a few, and the Crimson Tide have won a few.
What's it going to take for Jim McElwain to get the respect he deserves? I'm one of the guys that supports him a lot. I feel like he's a great coach that's underappreciated. All he's done in 2 seasons as Florida's head coach is win 2 SEC East championships.
Yeah, that's right. And obviously the East has been down. The West has been stronger. But having said that, the East is there for the taking. And you've got, the guy at Tennessee has been there quite a while, hasn't been able to get over the hump. Mark Richt has been there a long time and couldn't win each of the last 2 years either. And Steve Spurrier had a chance there. He had a great run at South Carolina. But, retired there last year, and then the year before that didn't win it either in 2015. So somehow, some way, Jim McElwain has gotten the Gators into Atlanta twice. Obviously haven't been able to beat Alabama, clearly head and shoulders above everybody else. But to sit there and think that the Gators have won 2 Eastern Division titles with back-to-back offenses that have been downright offensive, not even in the top 100, that speaks to good coaching and great defense and good special teams. Now, obviously, the task this year is for us to improve offensively, and we could improve. If we improve by 50 spots, it'd be a big jump, and yet we'd still only be about, 55 or 60th in the country in offense. But I don't think anybody would complain if we were able to make that kind of a leap this year.
I'm probably about 8 months late asking this question, but we didn't have you on then, so I'm going to ask it now. Was the win at LSU last year, after all the bloviating from the LSU side and the national media side, was that the most satisfying win since, say, maybe one of the national championship games?
Yeah, probably was. Because certainly for a regular season game, there was so much hype going on, and that week leading into the LSU game during the regular season, it was scary around here because that storm was headed really right for Alachua County, right for our campus. Now, it took just a little wiggle and skirted up a little bit north. But the people over in Jacksonville Beach, along the coastline, they got hit really, really hard. I don't think people understand the damage that was made, and that was just with a slight wiggle. If that wiggle of that storm doesn't happen, it's going to come right at us. And, this is as late as Thursday, and, we obviously didn't play the game that weekend. And then, obviously, well documented all the back and forth that went on between the two programs. So to go over there and when we played very well, and be able to beat them on their field and, kind of shut them down a little bit. And yet, we weren't at full strength, really. And somehow, some way, Appleby was able to drop back out of the end zone and throw about a 50-yard pass to Tyree Cleveland and caught it about midfield. And then went the other 50 yards. It was a 98-yard touchdown play. That was the play of the game until they got down to the goal line. And then we stopped them, on 3 or 4 times, I think 4th and goal, and it didn't get them in, and we were able to celebrate right there in their south end zone, the championship. So that was probably, in terms of a regular season win, as significant as any. And then, of course, in the negotiations, they've got to come here for the next 2 seasons. So they did sell out a little bit for that win last year. They didn't get it, so they're here this year, be here again next year. And obviously, you got a little bit of an advantage when you play at home, but it doesn't guarantee anything. I mean, shoot, they could come in here and beat us in the swamp this year. Now, we were fortunate enough to win every game at home last year. That's been kind of Jim McElwain's theory here, or goal, I should say, is regain the swamp and make it a tough place to play again. So we feel we've taken that step a little bit. We have a really good home schedule this year too, with a lot of quality opponents coming in. So it's going to be interesting.
You mentioned Florida's schedule, and I think one thing that has gotten a lot of talk is that Florida will be playing Michigan this year in Dallas, and it's one of the first times in I don't even know how long Florida is traveling outside the state of Florida to play a non-conference opponent in the regular season. Is this something Florida is going to do on a more regular basis now?
Well, I would say yes and no. I would say yes if ESPN is going to throw $6 or $7 million at them every year, and that's why Florida and Michigan are playing. They're getting about $6 or $7 million to go play the game in Dallas. So obviously that's not going to happen every year. Like I said, this is my 29th year, and I've never had a Florida game on the road to start the year. In fact, we haven't been on the road to start the season since 1987. So it'll be 30 years since we played a road opener. In my first year here in 1989, we didn't have any pre-SEC games. There was a quirk in the schedule, and we opened up the '89 season by playing Ole Miss. And Ole Miss beat us in the first game, and I remember that game vividly. We got beat on a pick six kind of later in the game, and the fans were upset, and they were calling in on the talk shows after the game and dissing everybody. And then I was about halfway home to my house, and one guy called in and said, "Yeah, and the new announcer, he sucks too." That was my first game of my first season, so I thought, uh-oh. So and then in 1991. We went to Syracuse in about, I think, the second game of the year, second or third game. And a kid from Tampa playing for Syracuse, a kid named Kirby Dardar, runs the opening kickoff back for a touchdown. And we never led in the game, and we got beat. And that was the game. That was the week. This was Steve Spurrier's second year, and it was a week in which he had been. People were starting to pick up on the fact that this guy throws his visor a lot. And so people were saying, you need not to throw that visor. So Steve tried very, very hard all that week not to throw his visor. And we go up there and we get pummeled, really. I think it was 28-21, but we were never in the lead. It was the biggest game they'd ever had in the history of Syracuse football going into that game in 1991. And after that game, Steve said, "You know what? I'm never going to listen to anybody else ever again. That's who I am. If I throw my visor, so be it." And he continued to throw his visor until his last game. It curtailed a little bit toward the end, but he said, I've got to coach. It was a learning experience for him in terms of I've got to be who I am. I got to coach the way I can coach. I'm not going to listen to everybody else who may not like me throwing a visor. And he had plenty of reasons to throw a visor that game, and turned out that was a unique game because I think right after that we did play Alabama in the swamp and beat the Crimson Tide that year 35-0, and it was an SEC title year for us in '91, and so we had some great ones. I go back to the year before that in 1990, which was Steve's first year at Florida. We're playing at Bryant-Denny, and we're trailing 10-0 at the half. And we come out and we end up beating Alabama, I think 17-13. And that was really the game that kind of put Steve on the map a little bit in terms of, hey, Florida had never been able to win that kind of game previously. And they won that game and, of course, had the best record in the league that year. They weren't allowed to claim the SEC championship based on things that had happened back in the late 80s. But Steve never forgot the fact that that was a big win at Alabama in '90, and it helped Florida have the best records. And of course, they won it in '91, and then '92 they were down a little bit, and we had the great game over at Legion Field in the first ever SEC championship. A tremendous game of Antonio Langham make that pick six, and wins the game for Alabama. And then we beat them in '93 over at Legion Field in a great low-scoring game. And then that was it for the SEC title game. Then moved to Atlanta. So we've had some good historic games between the Gators and Crimson Tide.
You know, Mick, I was at the game in '90. I want to say that's the hottest I've ever been. Then I was at the SEC championship game in '92. That's the coldest I've ever been at a football game. And in '93, I think that was the most drenched I've ever been at a football game. And then finally, when they moved to the Georgia Dome in '94, I was pretty happy that we finally got that Alabama-Florida game into a dome.
Yeah, you know what? I love the Georgia Dome. I mean, selfishly, I mean, for a broadcaster, the broadcast booth was in such a great position. You're almost right at the 50-yard line. You're not too high. You're not too low. You felt like if you reach out and almost touch the sideline. I just loved it. And so I hate the fact that, last December was the last time we were in it. And I'm sure the new place is going to be nice. But even like Jerry World, these new places now in the NFL, the radio booths are basically in the end zones. So, it's harder to call a game when you're in the end zone as opposed to, you get used to calling it between the 35-yard lines, so to speak. So I'll be interested to see. Hopefully we can get back and see the Dome this year. I'm interested in seeing the Jerry World, too. Now, as I mentioned to you earlier, I've been in there 3 times for Gator basketball in the NCAA tournament. It's a wonderful venue, but this will be the first actually going in there for the express purpose of a single football game in that stadium. So it's an interesting matchup, Florida and Michigan. We've never played them 3 times in bowl games and lost all 3. Both head coaches are entering their 3rd year on their programs. So we'll see. I mean, here's a little side note. I tried a couple of weeks ago to get started on the Michigan team, and I looked, couldn't find their roster. So I emailed them and asked if I could have their roster, and they said they're not going to publish a roster till game week. And then about 2 days later, they got called on by the New Jersey paper, I guess, for public information records, and they had to make the roster available, but they said they wouldn't even do it till next week.
I know, it's really, Harbaugh's got some quirks about him that, look, it's good for college football, I think. But, Mick, best of luck to the Gators this year. Hopefully Alabama and Florida will meet up again in Atlanta in the new Mercedes Dome. And, hey, best of luck to y'all. Y'all are going to need it. You open up with Michigan and finish up with Florida State. I can't imagine a tougher schedule sandwich than that.
Yeah, that's pretty tough. Now, like I said, we got a bunch of nice home games, but to start and finish like that's tough. We've got to maintain our defense. Our kicking game is very good. We just got to get better on offense. There's no question about it. And if we can get better offensively, we've got an excellent chance to win the Eastern Division again, and maybe one of these days we'll get over that next hurdle.
Well, talk to us again soon, Mick. We really do appreciate your being with us, and best of luck to you again.
All right, thank you. Thanks for having me on. You take care.
That was Mick Hubert, the play-by-play voice of the Florida Gators, and man, he just screams out, "Oh my!" And it's so ingrained in college football now. And if you ever listen to a Florida game on the radio, especially when Tim Tebow was at the helm, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. We'll be back in just a minute with more Sportz Blitz Live.